Hello and welcome to Sophie & Co. I'm Sophie Shepard-Knotson. Unmanned aerial vehicles, better known as drones, are in high demand and a multi-million-dollar industry. They're praised for not risking pilots' lives, are a formidable weapon for any army and a nightmare for the enemy. But also loud are the voices who label them unaccountable killing machines and demand their ban. Today we talk about the drone controversy.
Removed from the battle zone, hidden in the desert miles from the bullets, these pilots fly their aircraft from the ground, hitting targets they see on a computer screen. How much more than a video game is their mission? Are they trigger happy? Do they realize they actually take somebody's life?
And our guest today is Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Black, a retired U.S. Air Force drone pilot. It's really great to have you in our studio today. Now, you're a retired drone operator and now a consultant. And you've said in one of your interviews, I've heard, that the time it took you to get from your home to work to your box from which you're actually carrying out the missions, that was just enough time to put on your game mask, game face. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's the transition from I guess what you would consider civilian life to the military life, and in particular for Predator pilots, because you are living in a civilian atmosphere and not surrounded constantly by the military, by the wartime mentality. It's an important transition.
Mm-hmm. But did you at any point experience some sort of cognitive dissonance? I mean, 1 minute you're living a normal life, the next you're killing the enemy, and probably civilians as well, via a screen of a battlefield?
If there was any of that, it was going back the other way. It was being able to put it aside as you went back to civilian life.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the most vocal drone critics is Brandon Bryant, and you probably heard of him. He was on CNN not too long ago. And he spent several years as a drone sensor operator. Now, he believes that drone technology is very dangerous because it removes the natural psychological fear of kill. That's making the operator detached from what they're doing. Does this describe you in any way?
I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I would say that it's just the opposite. Whenever a strike happens in the Predator community, Predator Reaper community, you are intimately involved in that. You are so much more involved in that particular action than, say, an F-15, F-18 driver that shows up, drops their weapon, and then flies off. You have been there watching the subject, watching the target for hours, maybe days on end, and when the action happens, you're the one who has eyes on to see what happens, and they use you to make sure that the battle damage that occurred is what was required. When
you're away from a war zone and you don't actually experience the horrors of war, doesn't that numb the feeling of killing someone else? Because you're away from it, you don't actually experience, you don't see it. It's a blip on your screen.
No, absolutely not. And what I would say, again, the Predator operator is so much more involved in what is going on than your average fast mover jet fighter pilot or your B-52, B-1, B-2 pilot, who will never even see their target. They will be dropping when they get to a particular point. A Predator pilot has been watching his target, knows them intimately, knows where they are, knows what's around them. I would say it affects the UAS community much more.
Mm-hmm. But are you or your colleagues as drone operators, would you say, cut off from the controversy that the drone program causes in a wider sense?
Well, if you were talking about the Predator itself, like I say, it's far more intimate than we have ever been in actioning targets from the air, except for maybe for an A-10, where you are right there. And actually flying the aircraft and working the aircraft, it's nothing like a video game. It's far removed from that. But that removal actually places me closer to what is going on the ground, what I'm doing to help the forces that I am helping. I am much closer to them. I can hear the actual battle going on. I can hear the stress in their voice. I know that they are relying on me. I'm much closer to it. I can see it in very good detail. As far as the actual implementation of the weapon system, that is obviously a political calculation made by our leadership, and their calculus is way beyond our level.
So I just want to walk our viewers through the pros and cons for those who aren't aware. So the drones keep American soldiers safe while the enemy is killed, which is a great thing. I mean, who wouldn't agree with it? Killing the enemy without killing your own soldiers. On the other hand, innocent civilians die at an alarming rate. American think tank, the Brookings Institution, for instance, says in Pakistan, for every militant leader killed, 10 civilians also die. Then you also have the United Nations, who is even concerned that this might contravene international law. Do you consider the other side of the argument at all?
Well, there's 2 points there again, and you're probably talking about the Amnesty International. You're heading towards the Amnesty International report. I have not seen their evidence, so I can't intelligently say that the 2 particular strikes that they were talking about had happened or not happened. So I have a tendency to believe that, based on my own experience, that those figures are excessively inflated. I have seen, and me and my colleagues have jumped through many very, very restrictive hoops before we are allowed to employ, to the point that we have actually done damage to blue forces because we weren't allowed to employ. The one incident in Pakistan that Amnesty International talked about, again, I don't know their evidence, but a lot of things happen in that area that are unintended and not caused by the United States at all. For example, I personally watched a bomb emplacer blow himself up, and I don't know whether or not those 2 incidences happen to be from a strike, or did they happen to blow themselves up, or was there something planted on the ground that lady happened to walk over and trigger?
Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify something. When I ask you these questions, I just want you to know that no one doubts the initial intention being for the greater good. Because once again, who wouldn't want to kill an enemy without having your own soldiers die? But the truth is, it's not only the Amnesty International, but other think tanks as well, and other organizations that have proven extensively that when the concept of drone is put in place and it starts to operate, it entails repercussions. It entails grave consequences that aren't dealt with. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. You're talking about collateral damage.
Yeah, I'm talking about collateral damage. And the fact that, for example, American government wouldn't talk about it. I mean, it only talks about the fact that drones are good. But it turns a blind eye on the fact that there is collateral damage, and it wouldn't give us the numbers of how much people are actually dying along with the terrorists.
Well, and I don't know, I do not know what numbers have been listed officially by the government. I can't speak intelligently about that. I can tell you, though, as our leadership thinks, and in their calculus, they have to weigh into the fact that we do need to action this. We do need to use force. We do need to protect our forces. Within that calculus, there is the collateral damage aspect of it. How much can we accept in what particular phase of the conflict? As the leadership figures that out, they obviously want to minimize that as much as possible for the obvious reasons you're talking about here. It's bad. It's a horrible thing when somebody dies that doesn't need to. And they want to minimize that. If you are going to minimize that, this is the weapon to use. This is like a surgeon walking into an operating room with a scalpel as opposed to an axe. the chances of collateral damage happening from a UAV strike who's been overhead a target for, well, for example, Zarqawi, 600 hours. The Predators flew on Zarqawi for 600 hours before they actioned that target. The knowledge gained, the capability, the ability to wait, the ability to strike when the time was right is so much better with this weapon system than has ever been experienced in any other phase of warfare in any other time.
Did you ever think or consider that maybe the leadership is turning a blind eye on collateral damage and not really getting too deep into the collateral damage problem because it's just so convenient the way it is? American soldiers aren't dying, and who really cares that others are? It's a clean war for America. Do you know what I mean?